Well, hello, everybody. Thank you again for coming on to Alternative Venues for Jazz. I am so happy to have the people on here, someone who I've known and admired for longer than he claims to be old, and that's Gary Bartz. It's been maybe 30 years since I've known him, and I'm really happy to see him. And Adrian, I just met him
Yes,
today, but
good to
I've
meet you.
heard so much about him and already in
Thank you.
awe of him. And
Thank you.
Ali Shaheed Muhammad, I'm glad to
Mhm.
have you here. It's been a long time. I think we were in Los Angeles having dinner together 4 or 5 years ago, and that
Yes,
might be the
yeah,
last time I saw you.
that was about the last time I saw you.
I
Just when I
know.
moved to LA, so it's good to see you, cousin.
Yeah, I know. We got to fix that. It's too
Yeah,
long. So I am happy to have you here for one reason, and that is jazzisdead.co. I got to have somebody explain that to me at some point.
Yeah.
Adrian, why don't you start with that? Jazz is dead. Is
Yeah.
jazz dead, or what's your whole theory behind that?
Well, it's a name of our collective. It's the name of our movement. It's the name of our label. But what it really exemplifies is the notion of being rhetorical, right? Like it's a statement that gives you a feeling. So we love to use the term jazz is dead to describe us because when they see what we're doing, it's exactly the opposite, right?
Right.
There's so much nuances. There's so much depth to it because you're defining. Everybody could define. Well, first of all, what is jazz? Okay, so is jazz something that we coined the name for, or was it coined? Was it given to us? Like there's all these different levels, right? But I say this all to say, if we really define jazz as freedom music that was created uh, by Black Americans to represent freedom, the question is whether the message of jazz is still alive or not, and it's something that we love for the people to ask. You see what I'm saying? So
Yes.
yeah, so it's like one of those things you ask you a question, I didn't answer your question, but I gave you so many ways
Yes,
that
you
you could
did.
actually answer on your own. Yeah,
You gave me a lot
yeah,
to
yeah,
nuance. And that's
yeah,
why I want to go to Gary Bartz because
yeah.
when I think of jazz, when I think of alto saxophone, when I think of all the things that attracted me to this music, Gary is one of the people who exemplifies that. So,
Mhm.
Gary, tell me, what was your first impulse that let you know that you wanted to be a jazz musician? Or do you use the term jazz?
No, I
Ah,
do not use the term jazz.
okay.
Let's get
So
that
tell me,
straight.
what do you call it? And
It's such a demeaning word, and it's I equate it with the word nigger,
Damn.
okay,
and many of my peers also did, but it
okay,
was forced on us. It was forced on us. If you ask Duke Ellington in his book, "Music Is My Mistress," he says the music that they want to call jazz. He
ah,
didn't. He did not call it jazz. Louis, that's not you. I guess you know the history of it, right?
yeah,
Where
yeah,
it comes from the It comes from the whorehouses
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
because that's where the music first took root. Was in the whorehouses of New Orleans.
mm.
And so they referred to, and I guess we can really talk here, right? We're not
I only have eight
censored. We're
thousand
not
listeners, so
censored.
that's not that many. Go
Well,
ahead.
well, they would say I'm going down to when they would say I'm going down to the whorehouse to get some pussy. The word was jazz. I'm going down to the jazz house to get some jazz, and
Okay,
Mm.
okay,
because they said, and there was music there. Well, what kind of music was it? It was jazz music. It was music from the
Mm.
whorehouses. It was
mm,
pussy music.
mm.
So, so my stance is negative word, even though the word has given birth to the greatest music ever created on this planet.
What do
Mm.
you call it?
Music.
Music.
Mm.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yes.
No one can argue with me about that.
What do you think about Nicholas Payton's calling it Black American music? Does that resonate?
It's better than jazz.
Okay. All right. All right. So tell me, Ali, what was the impetus for you, your first impulse that led you to what we're going to call today music?
That's a cute question. I was so prepared for the other music. Um, that makes it so much broader. Now I'm
I
like,
know. Well, answer it as though
well,
we're talking about the
yeah,
impulse to, because I know that when you were with Tribe Called Quest, you all used a lot of jazz musicians
yeah.
in the work that you did.
So my first conscious relationship with music was actually through my grandmother. She was a huge Ella Fitzgerald fan.
Okay.
And she listened to a lot of Duke Ellington and Ella Fitzgerald. And actually, I was like real early, like 5 years old, and it was the music that I always associated with my grandmother. And going to her home, her other big artist was Johnny Mathis, which is on a different level of music. But and so it was really through Ella's voice, and her voice was just so warm, and just the compositions really. I didn't know what it was different than everything else that was going on. My mom was listening to Motown, Al Green, even Teddy Pendergrass, like the sounds that were coming from Philadelphia and stuff like that. But it was just always a different feeling going to my grandmother's. And then and I had to say that I wasn't completely like, oh my God, this is amazing. It was just like, this is different, and it wasn't until I met Q-Tip, and then he started, we were, going through each other's collections and just talking about music and stuff like that, that I really got an education that was beyond just Ella Fitzgerald, beyond Duke Ellington, beyond even at that point in the 80s of some of the artists that were prevalent of that time. With Tip, I met, I was introduced to the Gary Bartz. I was introduced to other artists from the 60s, a 60s, 70s period. And so, listening to a Chico Hamilton, listening to a Freddie Hubbard, it became soulful and hard at the same time, and which was way different than Duke's. Duke had, kind of like you floating kind of a thing, but this was like, I was like, this is my thing. This is my people. I understand this. And so, especially because at that time in the 80s, when I met Q-Tip in high school, it was like 1984. And so hip hop was on its way. And so to me, hearing those records made me feel like, I'm listening to this new development of music. But it was just something that was a lot more melodic and free, but just raw hardness. It's the best way. It was beyond that bebop era, which is, obviously we couldn't get here without that, but that was my introduction.
That's amazing, really, because in our family, my father was a disc jockey in the clubs in Chicago, which is how I got introduced to it. And so jazz kind of runs through, for those who don't know, Ali, Shaheed, Muhammad, and I are cousins. And it's something that's like a through line through our family. And so, at least two of us, and I'm sure a whole lot more, really got, attached to this music. Gary, tell me, what was it like working with these young bloods playing what you play, and how did that whole experience work for you?
Well, I still want to stay on that subject for a minute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I like. I mean, like, feel free to just interrupt each other.
Wait, before I interrupt, I mean, before you say that, Gary, I want to say, you know, like my first time actually meeting and seeing Gary was at a winter music conference in winter jazz festival in New York City, and I don't remember what year this was. This was like in the 2000s, and I was there because, you know, like Tribe sampled Gary. I was like, yo, I'm going to see the great, you know, like I'm going to see the great play, and then I didn't know about Gary's position. I just knew his music. You know what I mean? And at that show, he kind of like gave a little lecture, almost kind of like what he was talking about just a moment ago. And I was like, oh, like it messed me up to the point that I came, and I know you don't notice because I never didn't even mention this when we worked together. I said my hellos to you, but I just went to the corner and just kind of like processed everything that he has just said, you know, because I had never heard anyone, you know, of his ilk speak like that. And so that was my introduction, my real introduction to, you know.
There's no doubt about Gary as an innovator.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, I mean, I was fortunate that I was around musicians who thought like that, or who opened my mind to that, because I came from a segregated city. Mm-hmm. And so
it's Baltimore, right?
Baltimore, Maryland. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was actually in the second graduating class after they desegregated schools, I think in 54. So we could go to their schools in 54. I went to high school in 55. So, okay. So I was the second graduating class. There were 7 of us in the whole school, and they wanted the more intelligent. You know, they tried to pick the most intelligent. You know, so and they convinced, because I was supposed to go to Douglas High. That's where all my family went. You know. Okay. I mean, my mom, my grandmother, you know, my aunts, uncles, they all went to Frederick Douglass, which was right near me. I could have walked to school.
Wow.
You know, and I mean, we're getting into a whole nother thing, but they told me, well, the music program over here at this white school, I mean, you know, it's much, but it was awful. They didn't even, I mean, they said no jazz in the band room. That was one of the rules. No jazz in the band room. You know. Wow.
Wow.
So I mean, this stuff. I mean, it's a long story, but you know, like I said, I was around Mingus, and Mingus definitely hated that word.
Did he?
Max Roach would fight somebody for calling him a jazz musician.
Max Roach actually said once to me that jazz is the original 4-letter word.
Yeah. That's why I'm pussy. Fuck. I'm gonna go get. I'm gonna jazz that man. You know.
Wow.
That's what the word meant early on. You know. Mm-hmm. But see, it comes from this times of when we would, you know, when our ancestors were brought here and put in the bondage. You know, we had to say things in codes. You know? So a lot of our words were coded. You know. And so when the white people, when they heard it, they didn't know what we were talking about. So they made up their own, you know, they gave it their own definition. Mm-hmm. And because they own everything, like the newspapers, the media, the movies, the whatever, you know, they forced that word on us. Mm-hmm. But believe me, I mean, everybody from Miles to, I mean, everybody that I know, no one likes that word. A lot of people have accepted it, but a lot didn't accept it. I will never accept that. I'm sorry, you know. Mm-hmm.
I don't think you have to.
No, and I won't. Oh, Ronnie.
right. You don't have to. So what is jazzisdead.co? Is that more than a record label? What else are you all doing with that branding, Adrian?
Yeah. So basically, what we have concerts and we have records. So with the concerts, I mean, just beyond just the concerts, the records, the merchandise, and all that stuff, I think the ethos behind it is that we all love quality music, right? And you know, the impetus behind us putting all this stuff together is it's twofold. One is all of the living legends that are just as talented, if not even more talented than they were back then. Like, we want to make sure that they get the love that they're supposed to get. You know,
Okay.
so like bringing these cats out to our audience, which is really their audience, right?
Yes.
So the thing is, I have a record store, so Gary's records are in my shop, and it's up there for like $200. Like they're hundreds of dollars for these records, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people just don't even think that they could go and see these masters, meet these masters, and in addition to that, hear new music from these masters.
Right.
So we got together and wanted to create these concerts, right? And create these concerts just to kind of show love to the people that we love, our legends, but also bring something to us. We all want to hear it. And then in addition to that, we want to record new albums with these masters, with these luminaries, but not in a way where we're rehashing what they did before. It's more
Okay.
so in a way where we're earnestly trying to continue the conversations that they started. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So like that's what this is all about under the auspices of Jazz is Dead, right?
Okay.
So it's like when you walk into one of our concerts, like Gary's concert sold out, people singing his music, like he's just a god in front of everybody. Like that's the kind of stuff that brings tears to our eyes. It's like
Right.
because we got so much from them, right? So if we got so much from them, especially of the hip hop culture, if we got so much from them, what can we do to give something back, just to remind them how special they are to us? But they're still here and they still have more to say. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what all this is really about for us.
And so who else have you recorded?
Damn, we've recorded Doug Karn. We've
Okay.
recorded we have an album with Gene Karn. We have an album with Lonnie Liston Smith that's not
Nice.
released yet. We have we brought out a bunch of Brazilian
Roy
cats.
Ayers.
Roy
Roy
Ayers. Roy Ayers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
Brought out a bunch of Brazilian cats last year, like Marcos Valle, to Joao Donato, to Azimuth. Like there's so many. We just did Henry Franklin.
Nice.
But like we're not just recording music, we're
Yeah.
recording them the way that they recorded, decades ago. Like no computers. It's all analog tape. It's
Oh,
all
wow.
real. Yeah,
Okay.
it's all live instrumentation.
Right.
Real instruments, not a MIDI keyboard. It's like an actual Fender Rhodes, an actual acoustic piano, an actual drum set, but recorded to tape. And that's like it's its own different thing, right? Because when we are all in the studio with these luminaries, the generations normalize because it's like we're all kids in here,
Yeah.
And one thing about Gary is crazy because he's such a wise man, but at the same time he's just so young and youthful, and he it's inspiring to somebody like myself. I'm 43, and like I need to be like that guy. I need to be as wise as that guy and as young as that guy all the way for the rest of my life,
That's
so
right. That's right.
it's just all love and just.
So are you
really
creating new audiences, do you think, for this music that we all clearly love?
I'm
And I
not
would almost say regardless of what we call it, but I think if I even say that is minimizing it. But clearly we love this music. Are you creating new audiences for it, do you think, in doing this?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a new audience per se. Like, we have come to these artists through the vessel of hip hop, right? And so, to a degree, that it may seem new, but it's just not. It's just discovering music, like being placed in a time machine and you like 4 decades behind everyone else. But
Okay.
but it is new. It is a new audience, but then the relationship and the love for music and appreciation of real good music, that's nothing new. It's just that, like Adrian said, the people who come into the record store and people who are from the hip hop generation would have never thought that, they hear a song, they discover like, Tribe Called Quest sample Gary Bartz, and they know like, okay, they love Tribe, but then they go and listen to the source. They love Gary, but it's like not even sure we could see Tribe Called Quest live at this stage in 2020 whatever.
Right.
Let alone see a Gary Bartz. So it's not necessarily new generation, new artists. It's just we're saying, yeah, these luminaries are still around. They still want to stand there and show themselves to you. You want to show your love and appreciation for them. So that's really what it is. And the beauty of it is that you have, people who come to the shows who are in 70 plus, but then you see people, kids that are 8 years old who are getting that love because someone else in their family, be it their parents or grandparents, can come and show them something. But even you see that these kids actually know the music. Yeah. And that's the most beautiful thing when you see like a 10-year-old sitting there with their grandparent, and it's just like, oh my God. Like, I don't know how often this happens. I've never gone to a show with my grandmother. Like, not to see anyone play music. So
that's right.
That's the other side of it. And I wouldn't say that they were a new audience. They're just discovering the music a little bit later, but still have the same love for it as you did, as I did, as Adrian did when it landed on us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gary, how did that feel to go back to the way you used to record? I mean, it sounds like it had to be a great experience for you.
No, it was beautiful. I mean, I love that studio. I want that studio.
Hey, it's yours too, man. Whenever you're here, it's yours too, man.
Yeah, but part of all of this that we probably either don't understand, forgot, or don't recognize is that, number one, our heritage is an oral tradition.
Yes.
And so our music and music, if you want to go all the way back, is probably, and I could always say almost 100%, is the first religion. So music was the religion because people, and whoever knew how to play music or knew how to, bring forth music, they were the high priest. Whoever the leader was, the right-hand person was the top musician, So that's how important it was. And we see that today. But because it's so dangerous to people who want to control things, they had to control music.
Why is it dangerous? Go into that a little bit.
Oh, my goodness. Why is it dangerous? Well, I mean, okay. John Lennon, what did he say? He said, we're more popular than Jesus Christ.
Yes, he did.
And he was. Michael Jackson, Elvis Presley, Prince, I mean, they were more powerful than Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, any president. They were more powerful than that. And so that's why they have to be controlled.
Okay.
Michael owns, you know that story.
Yes.
About him owning all of it. We won't even go into that. But that's a dangerous man to some people. That's a very dangerous man.
Yeah.
Prince, slave. That's a very dangerous man to the people who run this, who you know what I'm saying?
So that ability to create what was the original music makes you dangerous.
The ability for someone to get to that level,
yes,
and know how to deal with it, and want to control themselves rather than to, because everybody, look, we're all being controlled. I have a book saying that the name of the book is Everything is Under Control. The double entendre. Everything is under control, you know, but it is. Everything's under control, you know. I mean, we look at the news.
So are you saying that in terms of the music, you're searching for that key to freedom? You're like, as you're creating music, you're really trying to search for that freedom, that complete freedom.
Always. The job of a musician is to hear something and create something that's never been heard before.
Yeah. I know whenever you see Ron Carter, you say hello to him. Ron Carter always say, "Still looking for that note."
That's right.
That's how he'll greet you. And they say that was very true about Coltrane too. That he was always there was always that one more note.
Miles, I mean, every great artist. I mean, just like a painter, they're looking for that next. They're trying the same thing. A writer, whatever your art is, you know. That's why artists are dangerous, because they can't be controlled, because they don't think like that.
That's true. That's true. And I have to say that when Adrian and Ali were writing the music for, what was the series that I like that I can't remember? Luke Cage. And I loved how you juxtaposed all the different music. It's like you would have some hip hop, and the next song would be a jazz song, and it all fell in. It felt right.
Because it's all the same. It is all the same.
Yeah.
I mean,
James Brown, on your part.
Yeah. James Brown could have grown up right next door to John Coltrane. They were the best of friends, gone to school together, did everything together, played ball together, and still played the same kind of music they both played. Because it ain't no different. We've just been tricked into thinking it's different.
Okay.
I don't see it. That's why people don't understand. I don't see the difference. I don't.
Do you listen to all of it? Do you listen to all kinds of music?
I listen to everything. That's my job. That's my job. The ears is the art form is for the ears. That means you have to listen. The harder and the better you know how to listen. Miles could listen better than anybody I've ever known, which is why he keeps changing things. Why he said, "Oh, I hear it. Let me see what this sounds like." You know, sometimes you're just trying stuff, but you hear it, and then you want to see what it sounds like. You know, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does. You know, but even when it doesn't work, it'll lead you somewhere else.
Okay.
So you have to.
Do you have that same feeling about searching for freedom when you do what you're doing, Ali and Adrian? Is that the impetus for doing what you do?
Always. It's I have this huge conflict. Like when I DJ, first of all, like I don't even like being called a DJ to me. But just when we're talking about the word jazz, and I hear DJ before my name Ali, and I just go, "Oh my God." But I understand, I understand the identity. But for me, I often frustrate the people who may come to a DJ set because they want that thing and they want me to stay in that world. But I come from the Universal Zulu Nation, so for me that means universal means everything, right. And so I move the music, whatever genre you want to call it, I move it, and I see the crowd just being so frustrated because they're like, "Man, we didn't come here for all of this." I'm like, "Yeah, you did. You just didn't know. You just didn't know that this thing that I'm about to drop on you is about to be your next favorite thing. You just got to go on that journey with me." So that's how I approach my DJ sets, and that's how I am in the studio. And Adrian the same way. We're always listening, as Gary said, to everything. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's Tchaikovsky to Mahler to Drake to Meg Thee Stallion. Like there's always a need for me to listen because there's information that I don't have yet. And and I want to be able to grow and expand, not just musically, but just as a human being. Like, just,
Sure.
you know, just like touch the stars, like physically. I want to be able to do that in some capacity. And so I have to increase my knowledge to be able to get me to that point. And when it comes to music, that's the relationship I have, you know, to try and be a better human. And is there something beyond just being a human? I just saw a documentary. Can't remember the name. It's something about fungi,
Oh, the
and how
mushrooms.
the mushrooms.
I saw that. Man,
And
that was
that
amazing.
documentary, just, I'm still like, that was weeks ago, and I'm just still like blown away by, like, so is this who we are? You know,
I know.
like just the way, you know, we go into the ground, and how it explains how all the trees are connected underneath.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, so for me, my music is the embodiment of that, like exploration, trying to figure out how to be a better human, how to connect with people, how to find a different way to say something different, maybe say the same thing, because sometimes, like in raising a child, you have to be repetitive,
Yeah.
but you might not say it the exact same way because you said it 12 times that way, and the child might not have understood it that. So you find a different way to communicate the same message, and that kid goes, "Oh, I get it."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's just how I like to be with music.
Adrian?
Yeah. You know, I love creating, and you know, my thing is that there's just a euphoria that we receive as musicians, because every time we create something new, we're the first person in the world to hear that, right? We're the first person, and it's malleable. It's up to us to figure out what we want to do. So we're like proprietors of 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 a new piece of property, right?
Mm.
So I that fuels me. It it creates this um insatiable desire to just keep on expanding and expanding. And
Mm.
as a creative person, I always say that I never do the same thing twice, right? So
Mhm.
so when people say, hey, I always say I never get writer's block. I do not get writer's block, because every
Okay.
time I create, I open up a new pathway, right? So if I've been creating with a bunch of major sevens, that means I'm going to go to minor sevens now, or that means that, you know what, I'm not even using sevens, or I'm just doing like lead with a seven. Like there's so many ways to go, and it's based on this constant desire to create something new and fresh. And
Mm.
it's funny because this actually takes me back to when we're in studio with Gary, because one of the things that really captivate me about the way that he plays is that how I write, I love chords. I love chords. I love going deeper and deeper in chords. I always say that my favorite music presents unexpected chord changes that make sense, right? Not
Okay.
just changing just to changes, unexpected chord changes that make sense. But it's crazy when Gary's playing a mono instrument,
Mm.
how he could bring the strength of a chord in melody, right?
Mm.
And if I'm saying, hey, right here we're in A minor 7 flat 5, all of the music he brings out of that alone, you see what I'm saying?
Okay.
And that and being there in that moment and hearing how he's expanding this stuff it just helps to further illuminate why music makes me feel a certain way and why there is so much freedom, because it's never ending. Like
Right.
all the way to the day you die, you're still learning, and you're
Yeah.
still like, oh damn,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like all the
Mhm.
way, you know. So it's just the ongoing, it's an
That's
ongoing
amazing.
journey. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. I want each one of you to do this. Give me something that someone gave you as advice to you that helped you along your creative path. Who was that person and what did they say? Gary.
Well, it's been many. It's been many, but I can go back to probably the first time someone, when I was 14, I asked my dad to take me to a matinee that Sonny Stitt was playing at,
Mm.
and he took me, you know, and Sonny Stitt announced that he'd like this young man to come up and play with him, and I'm saying, oh man, and then he calls me,
Wow.
My dad had sneaked the horn out of the house, unbeknownst to me, and went up and told Sonny Stitt, because he was, my mom, she always had, said, oh, he can play, he's the greatest, but my dad was always, I don't know, you might need something to fall back on, he was one of those, so anyway, so I'll go up and play, and so I played with Sonny Stitt, and he takes me through all the keys on the blues, and I don't know one key from the other.
Right.
So I went everywhere he went, because I was listening. This is how important the ears are. So I didn't know one chord. I didn't know what a chord was, but I knew what the sound was. So but when we finished, he told me a lot of things. But the one thing that he told me was, remember, young man, breathe from your diaphragm.
Okay.
And it's taken me a lifetime. I said, man, Sonny Stitt gave me a hernia.
That's great. Ali, tell me some advice that someone gave you. Who was that person, and what did they say to you that put you on this path?
I too have had a lot of advice. Some of it's tied to music, some is not. One thing that my father said to me, I wasn't raised by my father, so I didn't really get to spend time with him until I was like 10 years old. And he one day went to go renew his passport and left me in the car outside just for a long time. He gets back in the car, and without me really saying much, because if you know me, I'm very just even killed, have been quiet. My mom says since I came out, I was that way. But he looked at me and just said, son, you gotta learn to have patience. And I never even knew what that word was at that time. I was just like, patience. And it's like, it has always haunted me. But as I progressed, it's relevant for the music space. Because there's some people who, they're different types of musicians. I'm the type of musician, I actually, when I work with people, I'm just quiet and I listen, because I want to feel what they feel. I want to be able to understand and appreciate and see through their eyes versus me just like filling up the room with my vision, And so that those words of my father have always come to me. And then there's another, he's no longer around, great guitar player named Eddie Chalmers Alfred, who goes by the name of Spanky. He played for the Mighty Clouds of Joy. He played with a lot of people, Larry Coryell. He played with James Brown for a little short stint. But Spanky was a great writing partner. I met him through Raphael Sadiq. He played with the Tonys, and that's how we became great friends. And we'd have these writing sessions, and I go to my records and pull out a record and go, well, this is what I was thinking about Spanky. I'm still in my sampling stage. And he said, man, you got that guitar sitting there in the corner. What are you going to do with it? He said, I hear the way you describe chords and the way you tell me to play things. Like, what you going to do with that? And I said, oh, man, Spanky, I bought that guitar and I bought a video with it. And the man's stretch was like too wide for me. And I tried it, and I said, it's been sitting in the corner for 6 years. He said, not now. We're going to pick it up. And he taught me, he said, simple song, 3 chords. And he taught me Sweet Georgia Brown. Okay. And he said, now with this, you can continue your journey as a musician. You don't just have to be this person who's glued to the records. And he also told me to stop buying records because I had too many records at the time. But Spanky, if you look up Spanky Alfred on YouTube and you see him just go down a G chord with the level and grace and respect and reverence that he has for the instrument, for the creator. He would, when he stay at my house, he would go to sleep with his guitar because his wife wasn't there. And he would go to sleep playing that guitar and wake up and I hear Spanky playing that guitar. And so for me, that left on me, like I have to never be intimidated.
Yes.
Like never, by an instrument. It's just, it can't hurt me. it's only going to enhance the thoughts that I have inside and to go with it. So that's it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Adrian.
Yeah. So for me, it's one thing, and it's something that my father said to me growing up with school. He said, "Nothing's hard if you study," and that's something that literally changed my life because um, I realized that my job is to make tasks easier by putting in the work. So if you study that thing that was hard for you to do, that thing that was hard for you to comprehend, that musical language you just couldn't get a grasp over. If you study, it'll be easy. And like I use that for everything I do. If I'm writing for orchestra, if I'm trying to write a song for that we got to record in a couple hours, it's all because in the meantime I'm studying, I'm reading books. I'm constantly just reading, writing notes, rereading my notes while I'm having lunch. But I'm always studying to try to get my mind sharp and make sure I really get it. But that nothing's hard if as long as you study, makes everything virtually easy to do for me.
Well, what I just heard was hear the Black fathers, because each one of
Yeah.
you had a reference to something that your father said to you that still steered you
Yeah.
on the path. I have one last question, and we are free for the day anyway. I hope I can get you guys back at some point. But that is, what, Gary, would you say to someone young now who is on their path to this music? What would you say to them as the word of advice you want them to follow, or you would like to see them follow?
Well, it's like as I was saying a little earlier, it's that this music, that's the greatest music ever, was created by us being brought here. Our ancestors being brought here, and we come from an oral tradition. Nowadays, like I say, control is very important to people who are in control. They want to maintain control. So now what's going on with this music that comes from an oral tradition is being taught by a European concept. And it's watering this music down. And so now today, what I hear from a lot of young musicians is what I call Euro jazz. It's not the music that Charlie Parker played, Leslie, Louis Armstrong, any of them, Horace Silver, Art Blake. It's not the same music because none of them went to school.
Right. I think about that all the time.
They learned the proper way, which is orally. They learned from the generation before them. That's how it started. That's what this music is. Some religions are like that. There are many things are like that. But that's our tradition. Griots. We learn from the griots. We pass it down like that. We don't need to write it down. The only reason why you'd have to write it down is because when it comes to music, it's because you can't hear it. If you can't hear it, you shouldn't be playing it. That's the way I think.
Okay.
You can't hear it, so they're gonna rip I can see it, but this is not a art form for eyes.
Yeah.
It's for ears, so you need to hear it. So that's what I would say to young musicians: learn this music the proper way, and that's by your ears.
Thank you for that, Ali. What words of advice would you give to young people you want them to hear?
Find your purpose and only make music with purpose. I think that if you're able to do that, then it's almost like it's you can put like any religious doctrine. Since I'm Muslim, I'll put it that way. You know, before you do something in Islam, it's you have the intent, you have that connection. You're going to have a piece of food. You're intending to have the food. When you think about before you just go and grab it like an animal, but if you take a moment of pause, then you think about where the source of this comes from. You know, so then it goes beyond just you having to, you know, sustain yourself. It's like this came from somewhere that was outside of my existence of being able to make it, and it was given to me. So with the music, it's the same. You know, just like with what Gary was saying, this music was here before us, and it was delivered with purpose, hopefully to make our present understandable, and to give us the tools we need for to be in the moment. But in addition, our job doesn't end there, is to then send it forward, you know, for the next generations. And I think if you make the music trying to identify what your sole purpose is, and then when you go into the studio, you question what the purpose, what that intent is, I think you'll have a greater outcome with it. And I don't want to bash anyone of, you know, in the younger generation, but when I listen and see what's happening now, I feel that the purpose is a misguided purpose.
Okay.
And we are then embracing a lifestyle of failure as success.
Wow.
And there's nothing successful about some of the music that's presented when it comes to culture. And so I feel if there's more purpose filled music, I think we will advance. I feel like we're digressing. Like, you know, you guys, our parents, our grandparents did a lot for us to have these liberties, and we might not be living up to it.
Okay.
You know, for all the blood, sweat, and tears that you guys put into, you know, for us to have a better future.
Yeah.
And there's comes this frivolousness out of not having adversity that allows us to embrace this failure of a lifestyle. So I think if you want to make music, please do it with a purpose. Even if you recognize that your purpose is just to have fun and fuck off. You know what I mean? Like, excuse my language. At least identify that. At least knowing that if everything is, what's the title of the book? Everything's in control. Everything's under control.
Yeah.
Everything's under control. At least you know I'm under control.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of forced because I'm under this control to behave this way. But I know, and having that knowledge of knowing makes you maybe be able to get away from that control at some point. So just with purpose, know your purpose.
Wisdom.
Yeah. So
Adrian.
So for me, my advice to young people would be to try to usurp your desire to listen to new music. And it's not to say that people don't make good music anymore, right? But the thing is that, you know, technology has vitiated a lot of the cultivation and skill that came from yesterday, right? So it's especially in Black culture, with the exception of, I'll say, hip hop, because hip hop was sampling vinyl, sampling a lot of Black records. Black people always move to something else and never really look back. A lot of other cultures look back, you know. White kids now still know about classic rock. They still know about all that stuff, right? Classic rock. But Black culture doesn't go back, right? So what happens is that, you know, especially with us, the music, we served as beacons with the music, right? We had to shout for our freedoms through sound. And in that, we cultivated something that was very prideful. We created our own version of classical music that was better than what the Western world established. But throughout the years, when you look at what Black people have done with music, you know, it all got to the point where they're just pressing a space bar and the computer is telling them what chords to play. So what has happened is when you're if you're constantly listening to music that is not as cultivated as it was in our culture, that's all you need to satisfy yourself. But when you start opening up your mind to other forms of music as an artist, you realize that there's so much more you can go. And I'll close with one example. So I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she's really into music and making music. And she grew up, you know, around all these artists around me. She grew up in my studio. She grew up in my record store. But she loves a lot of new music, and I always like make fun of her, right, for it. But what's crazy is when she's making music now, she's doing these chords and all that stuff. I'm like, that's dope. Why don't you have a bass line? You don't need a bass line, but do you realize what a bass line does for you? And I was like, well, what are you talking about, Daddy? And then I was just playing her some music and just showing her progressions and counter melody and all that. So what's crazy is 2 days later, she's like, dang, Dad, you're messing me up, man. Like, I didn't realize all this music I'm listening to right now. Like, it's not, there's no bass lines. They're not doing nothing. I'm like, yo, I've been telling you this for the longest. But if that's all you need, that's all you need. So it's up to you. But like, listen to music that's going to challenge you, not just music that other people accept.
Yes.
So that's that. Yeah.
You know
so,
what?
So Adrian, she's listening to music and they don't have no bass lines?
They don't have to have no bass line, but the point is,
but the music that she's listening to, do they have bass lines?
Well, the new stuff that she was listening to, she was realizing it was just like a drum and like a little loop and nothing.
Right, else. It didn't have a bass line, right?
Like no bass line, no nothing. Like no lead, like no nothing, like no nothing. But right. Like it's all hitting her. It's all hitting her. Like, wow, I didn't realize I wasn't getting that stimulation because, I you know, I've been teaching her to open up her mind so she could feel the stimulation.
Yeah.
But if it's closed, you don't even know what you're missing.
Right.
So I mean, I'm sorry. I know we're running out of time, but one thing with you, Gary, let's go back to the stuff that, you know, that Tribe sampled from you, right? So I knew about you because of what they sampled. But then when I went back and heard your records, I'm like, holy shit, like this is so deep. But when I was 16 or 17, I couldn't understand why your version was so great because it's those parts that they sampled. It's as if they made you good.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't intelligent enough to realize that you made them good. No offense, Ali, but I wasn't intelligent enough, right? So like when I started studying music and then opening up my mind to receive that stimulation, then I got so deep in older music. And it was just like a whole new landscape. So that when I went back to what was in vogue of the time and hearing modern stuff, it was just like, this is all you guys are giving me. I can't. This ain't enough for me anymore. I can't deal with this. So it's about maturity, you know. And growing up. So yeah.
I have to tell you, we have been on for an hour and it feels like 5 minutes. You all have been generous and gracious with your time. You've taught me a lot in the short time that we've had together, and I am so honored actually to have you on my little AVJ. So thank you all so very much. I really appreciate it, and good luck with Jazz is Dead.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I hope that I can be in touch with all of you. And I'll see you later, cuz.
All right, cousin.
See y'all, Gary. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Gary.
Bye-bye.